Well, if you're a fan of this channel, then you know that I am an AMC fan, and I have a few American Motors cars, including this 1982 AMC Eagle four-door sedan. I always thought that the sedan was cool, as well as probably my favorite body style is the coupe, the two-door coupe, although the SX4 is also pretty sweet. But I do have an affinity for wagons as well, and I did come across a pretty awesome wagon that I wanted to share with you. And here it is, the 1980 AMC Eagle. Now, the AMC Eagle came together when AMC engineers decided that they would effectively take a Concorde body and put a Jeep four-wheel drivetrain, including the transfer case, underneath it. Well, not quite. This has a single-speed transfer case with a viscous coupling in it so that the four-wheel drive system can be engaged full-time. And in fact, in 1980, that's what it was. The badging that you'll see on the rear quarter panel of this wagon says automatic four-wheel drive as opposed to four-wheel drive, which is what the later one said, because in this case, it was a full-time four-wheel drive system. You couldn't disconnect it. Later on, AMC would add an option, the select drive, where you could switch between two and four-wheel drive. Although, interestingly, AMC in their brochures told you if you knew that you were going to drive in inclement weather conditions, that you should engage four-wheel drive as soon as possible, because in order for the automatic hubs to lock on the front wheels, they needed to make a full rotation. And so if you were stuck in the mud in two-wheel drive and you needed to put it in four-wheel drive, you're kind of out of luck if you can't get the car to have the wheels rotate one rotation, or the front wheels rotate one full rotation. That's how these automatic hubs worked on these. But there was no issue for 1980 because you got the full-time four-wheel drive system. And like I said, it had a viscous coupling, was a single-speed transfer case, and it was pretty awesome. And I say that because most of the four-wheel drive systems during this period were generally part-time four-wheel drive systems. Even today, they're part-time four-wheel drive systems. They just have an automatic engagement feature. But you can't, as an example, on a modern vehicle, generally put it in four-wheel drive high and drive around on dry pavement. The front wheels will chatter if you try to go around corners. But on these, because of that viscous coupling, you can drive on dry pavement, wet pavement, snow, whatever you want. And people ended up loving their little AMC Eagles, particularly in the snow belt. Now, the gorgeous 1980 model that you see here has a one-year-only grille up front, and it says Eagle there in the grille. They would go to an egg crate pattern the very next year. You can see, though, that the Eagle, because it had to be lifted in order to accommodate the four-wheel drive system, AMC designers thought that the car looked a little bit strange, having these 15-inch wheels and the car be significantly lifted. So they added some wheel flare extensions to make the wheel flares even bigger. And those were made by a company called Creighton that was actually an AMC subsidiary that would also make the plastic valve covers on some 4.2-liter inline six-cylinder engines for AMC. Unfortunately, those were known to be leak-prone, significantly leak-prone. But that was an AMC division that did that. And as you can see out back, this wagon is in really, really nice shape. The Eagle here had the tail lamps from the Concorde that it got in 1980. When the Concorde was first introduced in 1978, it really didn't have all the styling elements that AMC designers wanted. I think they just didn't have the money. And so in 1979, they put the new front end on. 1980, they put these tail lamps on the rear. And I think it's a handsome treatment overall. I do like the blackout trim too on the B-pillar as well as the rear portion of the wagon. It just gives it a nice accentuating look, and I do like the two-tone red. I think this is a very handsome wagon, probably one of the best AMC wagons that I've seen, just really because of the color. Now, one of the amazing things about the Eagle, the wagon, the sedan, whichever one that you choose, is that the cars actually drive phenomenally well. And it's pretty amazing because this is basically an AMC Hornet chassis that was around forever that they warmed over. And the AMC engineers just did a fantastic job. When you drive one of these Eagles, the engine is quiet. The transmission, which is a Chrysler Torque Flight, shifts very smoothly. There's not much noise inside the cabin. I wouldn't call it overly quiet, but it's also not offensively loud. It's, decently hushed, I guess is the way I would describe it. The steering is great and extremely precise, actually shockingly precise with relatively high effort. The brakes feel relatively good. The other thing I'll say is that by modern day standards, the 4.2 liter, 258 cubic inch inline six, it's kind of a dog. It's fine if you're driving it normally. It actually has good acceleration away from a stoplight. It just doesn't have a lot of passing power because depending on the year, these made between like 100, 110, 115 horsepower. Plenty of torque, though, to get this car, which is a relatively heavy vehicle. The Wagons were around, I think, 3,400-ish pounds, so they weren't light. And like I said, if you're driving it normally, you won't notice it. I think you actually enjoy that the engine is very, very smooth. But for passing power, especially above about 40, 45 miles an hour, it's just going to take a long, long time. Now, in 1980, because this had the full-time four-wheel drive system, these really didn't get that great of gas mileage either because that four-wheel drive system was engaged the whole time. I'd say on the freeway, you might be looking at 19 in that zip code on these. My 82 AMC Eagle sedan, because it has the select drive, if I leave it in two-wheel drive and I have a lock-up torque converter on that one too, I tend to get about 22 on the freeway, 23, which that seems more acceptable. And I think that's pretty good. My little 78 AMC Concorde I had with the 258 cubic inch 6 didn't have a lockup torque converter. It was just a 3-speed Chrysler TorqueFlite. And I used to get about 24, I want to say, with that. 25, it was a lighter car. And in that, the 6-cylinder could push it around really well. It just didn't have the mass of the four-wheel drive setup in my little 78 AMC Concorde. And the 6 was just a great engine overall. And now let's take a look at the interior. This particular one has all vinyl seating on it. Now, the Eagle seats are quite comfortable, as are the seats in the Concordes. And they're one of the first American cars to have reclining seats on the driver and passenger side standard. So that was a very nice feature. Often you paid money to get a reclining seat, and it was often just on the passenger side back at this point in American car history, but you got it on both sides with the AMC. The one thing that's a downside, though, with these cars is that they don't have an armrest, amazingly. So your hand is kind of sitting there on the seat, and it's not bad, but you do kind of wish that there were an armrest. You have an automatic transmission shifter out of a Ford. AMC, of course, stood for all makes combined, in addition to American Motors Corporation. So you got that shifter from a Ford Mustang. You got a steering column from GM on the interior. And under hood, you're going to see you got a GM alternator, a Ford starter, Ford Motorcraft ignition box, a Carter carburetor, GM air pump, GM power steering pump. So a lot of different components from all different, let's say, makers. These have Dana axles as well. So AMC was sourcing actually really good components, despite the fact that they, brought all that together. They had Chrysler TorqueFlite transmissions too, as I mentioned. They did make their own engines. The cars worked phenomenally well from my perspective. The only thing I would say is the assembly quality wasn't all that great. The body panel fits and gaps and the paint quality, it left something to be desired. But hey, what'd you expect from AMC? They just didn't have the money at the time to invest in new capital equipment in their plants, and they were just trying to do whatever they could with little money. And generally it worked. Here's one more exterior shot looking in, and you can see that blackout B-pillar trim, blackout door upper trim, and the sill panels actually are quite nice. They say American Motors, a nice little piece of detail, but I would say the interiors on these are generally nice places to be. The dash is a bit tired, kind of carried over from the Hornet and warmed over. But again, they did a great job. I got to give credit to the AMC engineers. They just did amazing stuff with so little capital. And here we have the venerable AMC 258 cubic inch inline 6-cylinder engine. This would be standard in the Eagles for 1980. Later, they would get the standard GM Iron Duke 2.5 liter 4-cylinder. And I think AMC did that for fuel economy. But oh gosh, that 2.5 liter 4-cylinder engine in a car that was this heavy, it must have been 0 to 60 in about 17 seconds, something like that, especially with the automatic transmission. That was not a happy pairing. I would say these Eagles, Oh, maybe the four cylinders were even slower than that, because I think these six-cylinder Eagles took about 15 seconds to get from 0 to 60. Again, that sounds lethargically slow, and it is. And if you stomp on the pedal, there isn't much go. But if you drive it normally, the engine doesn't rev up. It's very smooth, and you do move away from a stoplight just fine. So there is good torque. But like I said, I just cannot imagine one of these with a 2.5-liter four-cylinder underhood. By the way, AMC would eventually develop its own 2.5-liter four-cylinder, which I would actually say was better than GM's, and was quite reliable, good engine, used in the Jeeps of the era. And it was, I think it was a good four-cylinder engine overall. And we'll close out now with this photo of my 1982 AMC Eagle sedan. Notice it says four-wheel drive on the back as opposed to automatic 4WD. Wow, because mine has Select Track and the other one did not. I will say if you're looking for these, you have to be very, very careful about rust, because they, of course, were bought in the snow belt where the salt was used. So make sure all the jack points are good, firm, and solid. The rockers are solid. These cars did have factory Z-Bart undercoating from them in some years, and they did have galvanized exterior sheet metal in some years as well, but the underbelly was not galvanized, nor were the rocker panels. So, of course, the area of the car that got all the salt was not galvanized, but the upper portion that you saw was. So something just to look out for. And a lot of these, particularly with these vinyl roofs, tend to get some bubbling around the back window. Make sure you really don't want to buy one that has that. But overall, I would say these cars are super rock-solid reliable. The Carter carburetor, well, it's not that bad. It always fires up. Sometimes these run lean and you got to clean out the jets in them, but I've got a little trick for that I'll show in another video, and then they run great. I haven't actually ever had the carburetor apart on my 82 Eagle, and I've owned the car for 10, 12 years, I want to say. Yeah, it's been very, very reliable. Hope you enjoyed this spotlight on that beautiful AMC Eagle wagon. Thanks again for watching.